Hello and welcome to Don't Mess with Our Kids podcast. My name is Jenny Donnelly, and I'm here today with my friend Shauna Danberg. And Shauna's a grandma. I'm a mom, excited to be a grandma one day, but there's something we have in common, and that is that we are not okay with the attack on our kids. And I bet there are people listening today, Shauna, that are saying the same thing. They're looking what's happening to the kids and they're saying enough is enough. And it was back in 2016 that the country of Peru had a whole bunch of mama bears, papa bears that said, you know what? We don't like what's happening with these kids. They're getting attacked. The curriculum in the school is ridiculous. They're teaching our kids to be girls and girls to be boys. And what is happening? And they decided to do something about it. There was prayer and there was action in the streets. So they were able to turn their nation around. We heard about this only in 2023. And this grassroots movement that they built in Peru called Don't Mess with Our Kids, we brought it to the United States and said, well, we're doing that. Worked for you guys. They were able to oust the prime minister, oust the education minister. And George Soros pulled out all of his funding. They have had massive momentum in favor of protecting kids and family and biblical principles in their country. So we said, if it worked for you, it's going to work for us. Let's do this. So here you are. You're a part of Don't Mess with Our Kids. So we're excited that you're here. Thank you so much. I can't wait for you to meet the guest that I have today. I first saw her on Instagram. Okay. It just came up on my algorithm, and I'm seeing these kids in universities getting baptized in the back of trucks. I'm like, oh my goodness, revival is breaking out all over America's university and campuses. Now, that is a true sign of revival when the younger generation is getting awakened to Jesus, and they're getting baptized. They're publicly declaring their faith, and it's growing like a monsoon, which I know nothing about monsoons. I probably shouldn't use that analogy, but
I think it's fitting.
Okay, it's fitting. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she lives in monsoon area. I don't know. I live in the Northwest. There's not a whole lot of, we have what? We have volcanoes that erupt sometimes.
We
have earthquakes
20, 30 years.
Yeah, we just don't have a lot of that. We have very small bugs. If you don't like bugs, you should live in the Northwest because we have very tiny little bugs. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back on track. So Tonya Prewitt, this is the person you're about to be blown away by. Mm-hmm. She's the founder and visionary of Unite Us. In fact, you need to get to Instagram after you listen to this. Go to Instagram and follow her on Unite Us, because you're going to see what God is doing through a faithful mother, a faithful wife who happens to be married to the Auburn University men's basketball assistant coach for over 30 years. And I don't want to steal her story, because what she decided to do as the wife of a basketball coach, living that life, and coaches, their lives are very full. They live it on the court, the field. Mm-hmm. And she did not sit at home and separate herself from that life. She stepped in there and she brought the light of God through prayer, and God lit up that place. And now there are other universities that are saying, we need you here. What an honor it is to have you with us, Tonya. Thank you so much for being here. You've seen over 28,000 college students gather across the 5 universities, and you have plans for multiple events at colleges across the nation in the upcoming months. Hey, here's a fun fact. You have 3 daughters, and Madison, one of your daughters, was a finalist on the season 24 of ABC's The Bachelor. I bet that was kind of scary as a mom to go, okay, let's do this. Let's shine for Jesus in a dark world. That's what we're supposed to do.
So anyway, full control to God in situations like that, for sure.
But you know what, Tonya, you're a praying woman. Mm-hmm. See, we can align with God's crazy ideas to send our kids into dark places. Like your son, Sean, has been, served our country, and you release your children, and then you better be a praying mama at that point, right? That gives you great security. So anyway, we could only pick a couple topics to talk about today, and we need to have you back. I love to talk about your daughter, Madison, because she did it well. She was shining for Jesus during that. But can you take us back to the thing that God asked you to do as a wife of a basketball, a large, very successful basketball team? Can you tell us what God asked you to do? And I'm sure you didn't know it was going to lead to revival on multiple campuses, but take us back.
I had no idea. And I'll tell you, the funny thing about being married to a coach, it sometimes can feel lonely in a sense. And I remember there was a time when I was actually even praying, like, God, move us out of here. Like, I'm just feeling, like I'm ready to do something different. And it's just amazing how God sometimes in those moments will say, no, I've got something greater. And I can remember getting an email one day. I opened my email and the subject line on one of the emails said, something great, something big is coming. And I remember how it jumped off the page into my heart and kind of ignited something in me in the importance of praying for my children, but praying for other people's children as well.
Yeah.
But to take you back to the beginning, in January of 2023, I was mentoring college students and honestly had heard one story after another. Stories of girls who were just like battling pain so deep. And I'll tell you, I tell this to a lot of sorority girls that I talk to. I can look at your Instagram and everything looks amazing, but I can spend 10 minutes with you and find out behind those pictures is a lot of pain that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
And so through mentoring these girls and hearing these stories of girls being in their closet, isolated, saying, God, please don't let me live another day. I can't cope with life. It's too hard. One girl who was pulling all of her hair out just didn't know how to cope with the anxiety and the depression she was battling. And I think I probably got to story number 6 from a precious girl who something happened to her on a college campus and she just didn't know how to cope anymore and didn't want to be with friends anymore and became so isolated and depressed. And I think I stood up from that table and pushed my chair in and said, no more. Like, I refuse to sit back and watch college students suffer like this when I have the answer, and the answer is prayer.
That's right. Wow.
I'm super curious real quick, Tonya, because how were you having these conversations? Did you have a Bible study or how were you like having these conversations? What setting were you in to like interrupt these girls' lives and get connected with them like you were?
Right. I had started leading a college girls small group with our head basketball coach's wife, Brandy Pearl. And we were leading about 20 girls. And through that started mentoring them privately, one-on-one, getting to know them better. And then a couple of the girls too were just friends of my daughters that just confided in me and opened up and knew I was leading these girls and just felt, peace about talking to me about some of these things they wouldn't share with anybody else. And so it was through mentoring college students. And I'll tell you, if you'll give them time, if you will rise up and be a mama to some of these students,
That's
a spiritual mom, they will give you that time and open up and share things with you and allow you to pour into them and make an impact.
Yeah.
I've seen some women position themselves as sisters to the next generation. And the only way to mother the next generation is to change how you view yourself.
That's good.
In the context of what God is doing on the earth. I remember when God said to me, Jenny, you're going from sister to mother. And I remember going, kind of like putting on a nicer outfit, but you feel awkward. Like, oh, I'm not used to wearing something like, on upper level. And he said, well, you need to get used to it because that is the approach you'll be taking with people from now on, because people don't need any more sisters.
Yeah.
They need a mother.
That's right.
So, if you came at it as a sister, they wouldn't have confided in certain stuff. They'd been talking about the boy they like. They'd be, this and that. And, you wouldn't have been able to get underneath, behind the heart, to the deeper places, because there are some things you only tell a mother.
Right.
And you feel safe with the mother. So that hits strong.
Well, and I'm just thinking about our audience because, Tonya, you made space for that. You had to make space in your life to do that. And I just want to encourage our audience to do the same thing. It may not be young people. It might be just other mamas. It might be
so true.
Girls in your neighborhood, but people desperately need what you have. So I don't want to interrupt where you were going, but I just want to hear what happened next, because the simplicity of just stepping out in faith and making space for other people and being in that position of mothering. And then all of a sudden God does something miraculous.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's intimidating about this, and the enemy has all these reasons why you shouldn't do it, is that we have to You don't know the Bible well enough. You don't have your stuff together. And he's going to try to talk you out of it. And if you have a false identity, like I'm not enough, I'm not good enough for God, then you'll never do these things. But if
Yeah.
you say, oh, I'm not perfect, I make mistakes all the time. I do have something to give people. And you said it, Tonya. You said, that's enough because I have the answer,
That's
right?
right.
Because
That's
we
right.
have the answer. We might not have all the answers, but we
Right.
have the answer, and his name is Jesus. Okay, so this is happening. You're seeing these girls going through this. And one of the things you told me when we talked on the phone is that you were doing prayer walks. What did that look like just on the daily? There's no way you were thinking, thank you, God, for turning this into a revival.
Mm.
What did it look like for you to prayer walk? Was it like during practice? Was it before games?
What
Like, how did you take your normal life and just start praying?
I'll tell you. So the prayer walks began when my three girls left the home and off to college and moved out of the house. And I'm starting to question my identity. Like, I've always been mom. Like, who am I? And that's when I stepped up and started leading college girl small groups. And through that, I would walk on Auburn's campus every day, just praying for the students. It's like I could walk by students and sense things that were going on, like feel like just the heaviness and just the pain that they were facing. And so I would just pray. And I think at the same time I was praying, God, move us out of Auburn, I was praying, God, send revival to Auburn at the same time. And God chose revival. So I'm so glad for that. But
No
I
kidding.
I started leading like these college girl small groups. After hearing that last story where I stood up and said no more, I reached out to, I think, 5 of my small group girls. I said, meet me at Auburn's football arena. Football stadium. We are about to start praying on this campus for God to do something. There's a shifting coming. And it's
Come
going
on.
to come as a result of our
You said
prayers.
5 girls.
5 girls.
This is a prayer hub, Shauna.
I have goosebumps. Sorry. This is
Listen, 5 girls in the middle of a ginormous stadium holding hands and praying for God to move on our campus. And I'll tell you, I have to tell you, before going into the stadium that day, my oldest, Madison, texted me as I was walking in. She said, Mom, go read Exodus 33, 14, and 15. And so I took out the Bible and I got the girls together and I said, we're going to read this first. And it was Moses saying to God, if your presence doesn't go before us, do not send us.
Wow.
And God said, my presence will go before you. We went into that stadium. We prayed, 5 girls and a mama praying for revival on our campus. I left there, went to a tent revival with Coach Pearl's wife, who leads the Bible study with me. And we went to this revival. We went there that night. The message was on Exodus 33, 14, and 15.
Wow.
And I tell my girls all the time, my daughters, my small group, anybody that I talk to, I say, pay attention when God repeats himself. And so I've always looked for that, because I could tell you, we need to come back on another podcast to talk about when my daughter went on The Bachelor and all of that, because there was so much repetition from God in that allowed us to walk into it unafraid. But I go to this revival. I get up the next morning, this tent gathering. I get up the next morning and I'm getting ready to go back to the women's event. And God said, go home and go to church with your husband. I'm in Birmingham. So I'm driving back and I call him. I'm like, hey, I'm coming home. I'm going to church with you. And I'm driving home and the enemy, I'm by myself, starts saying to me, the assignment is too big for you. You're not qualified for what's coming. Well, I had not seen a greater vision yet. So I didn't wrestle with the enemy. I just didn't really understand, but he kept saying that over and over all the way home. I get home, I go to church with my husband. I sit down and the pastor comes up and he says, today's message is on Exodus 33, 14, and 15. And the enemy is telling you the assignment is too big for you and you're not qualified. But I'm here to tell you today that God's presence has gone before you and he will do this. And guys, I'm telling you, that repetition, that Exodus 33, 14, and 15 in the next 10 days came to me 10 times. And when God gets my attention like that, I know he's up to something. And so the prayers in about 2 weeks turned into, starting with 5 students, turned into about 200. Gathering on Auburn's campus, students gathering, pleading on their face, praying for God to move and set students free on this campus from just addiction and bondage. And it was just so beautiful. And in those prayers, we met every Friday on our campus. In those prayers, I saw a vision of thousands of students gathered in Auburn's arena. I didn't really know what was happening, except that there was such an urgency in me. I could not be stopped. I didn't
Mhm.
even
That's
recognize
right.
myself. I was like, I don't even know who I am right now, but I was going from
Wow.
every pastor in the city, every coach, every administrator, every campus ministry leader, and sharing the vision. And they're all like, we're all in. And I'll tell you that the final person I met with, when I met with Coach Bruce Pearl, I sat at a dinner table and I said, I've seen this vision of thousands of students gathered in our arena. He stood up from the table, he pushed his chair in, and he said, we're doing this, let's go. And we left. And I mean, in 6 weeks, we put together an event at Auburn University. It was a free event. We didn't sell tickets. We didn't have registration. We had no idea how many students would come. And we got there thinking could be 100, could be 500. We have no idea. And over 5,000 students showed up for this event. We planned it in 6 weeks, which was miraculous. And the beginning of something very, very amazing.
Wow. I hope everybody is just letting that sink in. So you got to put yourself in the storyline. You got to say, hey, wait a minute. Okay. I have this situation in my life. I have a couple friends. I wonder if we got together and just consistently prayed, locked hands, prayed for revival. Could you imagine if every prayer hub, Shauna, right now we have
Seriously.
about 6,000 prayer hubs. Can you imagine if every prayer hub had
Mm.
the intentionality to say, we're going to hold hands in this living room, in this workplace, whatever, in this park, wherever they meet, and we're going to pray for revival in our city?
Yeah.
Could you imagine if we get that intentional? See, God, he doesn't look for people with a large following on Instagram. I noticed that when he picked me, I was like, so you haven't looked at social media lately. All right. He doesn't look at how qualified we are. He does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called, and he
That's right.
backs it because he goes before us. He doesn't say, you've got to go before me.
Mm.
Like, you have to go before me with your reputation, with your experience, with how many followers you have on social media. And as long as I see that you're going before me, then I'll do something with you. Right. But that's what most people think. They think, well, God couldn't use me. Well, no, he's not going to follow you. You don't have that much going for yourself.
Yeah.
You're going to follow him. He's going to go before you. This is crazy. We have to have you back. We're going to have you back. Do you have any last minute thing that you want to give the listeners, that you want to share, any story that's on your heart?
Yeah. I will say this. We've been in 5 universities. We've seen over 1,000 students, thousands give their lives to Jesus, over 1,000 baptized. These students are hungry. They're hungry for truth. They're hungry for hope. And that's what we hope to give them. And I will say this, whoever wants to get this generation will get them. And I just pray that the mamas across this nation, like what you're leading, will rise up and begin prayer movements in every city across this nation so that we see what's happening through Unite happen through other ways to get this generation to the place that they need to be. Salvation, freedom, and connection.
Man, I'm inspired. I want to get on live right now and tell all of our prayer hub mama bears
Seriously.
to say, we're taking this thing to the next level. I feel such inspiration from the Holy Spirit. The thing that I want to wrap up here and say that I'm gleaning from you is, you knew it is not by might, it is not by my power, but it is by your spirit.
Right.
The Lord said it's his spirit. It's his spirit. And I told a group this morning on a Zoom, I said, I'm really done with us being Christians without God.
Wow.
I'm really done with it. I'm really done with it. I'm done coming up with things for God to bless. It is time to follow him and say, I don't know what I'm doing. Who cares? But I know this. I want to see revival and reformation on the earth.
Jenny.
And then we include God since we're Christians, right? Simple stuff. Thank you so much, Tonya, for being here. We appreciate you. We are going to have you back. I want to hear Madison's story about being on The Bachelor. I want to hear it from a mama's perspective, because if we bubble up our kids and say, oh, you can't go do that. And sure, for some kids with moms that don't pray and didn't raise them in the word, bad idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Bad idea. But when God says, I'm going to use this child to be a light in a dark place, and you have a praying mom and she has the word inside of her and she stands her ground and she didn't buckle and she didn't bend on that show, we've got to hear the story. We're so proud of her. I don't even know her. I haven't met her yet, but we're so proud of her for that. Thank you so much for being here, Tonya. We're going to have you back again. God bless you. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, you guys, you have to follow on Instagram, Unite Us. That's the handle, Unite Us. And then we have a website too, right, Shauna?
Yeah, it's uniteusmovement.com.
And it is a
Super
movement.
simple. It is a movement. I loved how it was all rallied around prayer. Go
Yes.
figure, right?
Come
But I
on.
was thinking about, she didn't go much into the prayer walks, but yesterday I was babysitting my granddaughters and I was at the park right by my granddaughters, my son and daughter-in-law's
Yeah.
house with my granddaughters. And I was talking to this other mom, and she is a pastor's wife, and she lives right across the street from my son and daughter-in-law.
Okay.
And I was telling her how, she's an answer to my prayer because I pray that my kids will be surrounded by other believers. And she goes, yeah, that's so neat because I actually do a prayer walk around this neighborhood.
Praise God.
And she said, those guys are really strong Christians and those guys are really strong Christians. And she's like pointing at the houses. And I'm thinking, wow, just the power of a prayer walk, the power of taking territory in a neighborhood, in a place, and then the power of getting together with other believers and praying.
Come on.
Prayer hubs, what that can do for a city, for a college campus, for a church, for a family, for a neighborhood. It's why we're doing what we're doing.
It is why we're doing what we're doing. We're not just trying to check the box. I did my prayer hub this month. No, we're uniting, even if we don't know each other, across the United States, across the globe. We have over 100 international prayer hubs, but globally, and especially concentrated in the United States, since this is our mission field. What if we looked at this from the angle of what we just heard? We looked at this and said, you know what? We're praying for revival and reformation, period, in every sphere of culture. And when we pray this prayer guide, we're going after this thing. And we fully expect to see God do something in our communities. And with that, I want to invite you to join Her Voice Action. So we have Her Voice Movement. That's the prayer side. Please start a prayer hub. You probably got that down by now if you didn't 30 minutes ago. Start a prayer hub, register that. We give you some freebies. We send you an email. You get discounts on stuff. You have a free course that is normally $99. But beside that, we need you praying with at least one other person once a month. And the prayer hub is absolutely free. Now, the second thing here is we have hervoiceaction.com. Her Voice Action is the action side of Her Voice Movement. This is where we say, okay, now that we've prayed, what do we need to do? Well, we might need to get on a football field and go out there and pray with people. We need to take action. We might need to go to the school board. We might need to go to our library. But I can promise you this, whoever becomes president of the United States of America, whoever becomes governor of your state, here's the reality. The governor and the president of the United States is definitely not going to go talk to your kid's 6th grade teacher about the curriculum that's not okay. They're definitely not showing up to the next school board meeting and fighting for you. See, God gave you a voice. God gave you children. God gave you a family. And it is your God-given right and your right as an American citizen to have the freedom of speech to say, this isn't right. I'm sending my kid here to school 8 hours a day, and I want to ask why they're being taught that there's 112 genders or whatever the case may be. See, you and I, if we don't speak up, we're going to lose the next generation. And maybe you listening right now, maybe you're like, I want to do something. I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. Well, guess what? That's why you are invited to join Her Voice Action for free. This is a national chapter. We meet once a month on Zoom. And if you can't be on the live, we can give you the replay. And then we are planting local chapters where you meet in person with people in your community. And guess what? You're not alone. And then we start these initiatives. Hey, we're going to go to the library this month. Hey, we're going to go to the school board. We're going to start putting our boots on the ground, and we're going to see things change on a local level. We're saying freedom is local. We got to vote. We got to do all those things. We got to get people in office, the right people. But the right people in office, what they're hired to do through our voting is do what we ask them to do. But if we're not asking, if we're not talking, they're going to listen to the people who are. I don't want to leave my kids' future in the hands of people that honestly don't fear, respect, or love God. And I don't judge them, but my kids deserve more. And I believe it's my job to do what I can. We can't do everything individually, but collectively as a group, we can hit school boards as a chapter. We could say, hey, that group's going to the library. This group's going to the school board. This group is going to walk the schools and pray. Imagine what we can do, Shauna. This is going to be so exciting. And we're just getting started. So please join hervoiceaction.com. And with any contribution whatsoever, whether it's $5, $500, whatever, we're going to send you a pin, a Her Voice Action pin. It's really cool. It has a faith, family, and freedom on there. It has Don't Mess with Our Kids. It's about as big as a nickel. You don't have to wear it if you don't want to. I'm going to wear mine in not every day, but I'm going to wear it certain places. It has the American flag on it. It has a cross on it. And it also has maybe one of the most important things of that pin has the voice echo symbol, because we want to make sure that you are using your voice. And with that being said, this is the end of our podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time at don'tmesswithourkids.com. Make sure that you share, like, share again, share some more, because somebody will not hear this podcast unless you share it with them. God bless you. We'll see you next time.